What's up guys, welcome back to Analytical Strategy and the final 5 of Australian Survivor, with honestly a really high quality episode to commence this final week of the season. Now earlier post-show previews have fooled me a couple of times for when I thought this season's finale would be, but unless production throws yet another curveball, I am pretty confident we will have 2 more episodes after this one prior to the season's conclusion. So we have Flick, Hayley, Wei, Cara and George left in the game, fighting for their life and to have that chance to take it all out in Australian Survivor Brains versus Brawn. It's a very interesting final 5 looking back on the season. With Flick, Cara and Hayley, they've all been voted out of the game before. Wei was saved by a bizarre twist in episode 1, and also George has been saved numerous times by idols and also other advantages in the game. So it has been a very strange season in that respect. But this episode starts out with all the brains still being heavily on board to put all 4 of their votes on Flick. But little do they know that she has a secret alliance member in her back pocket, being their hidden immunity idol. So there is absolutely no chance that she's going to be going home tonight. So based on this information, there is a very strong chance that all 4 votes will go towards Flick, and she can decide who she wants to send home, and I would expect that person to be George. However, based on the previous episode, Wei was also pretty keen on forming a tight 3 when there were 5 people left in the game, so I also think there was the chance that Flick could join forces with Hayley and Wei, which evidently would have had the same result of George going home. So I really thought this episode, George really has to pull one out of the bag and potentially even win immunity to proceed further in this game. Now on that note, George had an extremely interesting perspective on who he thinks the jury would vote for in this season. As the viewers, it may seem like a little bit of a bizarre thought process, but I'm guessing the players would know more about their fellow castaways than we would sitting at home. He thinks not only his best chance, but his only chance to win the game, is sitting against Hayley in that final 2. Now as a viewer, this seemed absolutely crazy to me, as from my personal perspective, on a jury threat level I think from this 5, Flick absolutely has the best chance of winning this season, Hayley and George are next in line with a relatively similar threat level, and then Cara and Wei are towards the bottom of this 5. But what we need to think about is what type of jury this is, and how they will decide their votes. I think Hayley has a fantastic chance to win against anyone except for Flick in the game, as we've literally heard contestants say they would vote for her if she does get to the finals. We've heard Emmett say that he wanted one of 5 people to win, which Hayley was included before he was voted out. We saw Danny say she thinks Hayley is a fantastic player numerous times this season, so to me it was a little surprising to hear George speak about her in this way. It was also interesting to think that he really may not get that many votes no matter who he sits next to, and as viewers we may think he has a great shot against anyone due to all the huge moves he's made this season, but then you think of all the people that really haven't wanted George to win, due to him taking them out of the game, and maybe he really is at the bottom of the remaining contestants from a jury vote perspective, but it is really hard to say. But nonetheless, I would absolutely love to see a Hayley and George final 2, which is what they were discussing as a possibility this episode. So in the immunity challenge for me, all eyes were firmly on George. As per my predictions, he really did seem like the one in the most danger tonight with Flick having this idol. So in the opening portion of the challenge, Wei was really struggling due to her limited strength, and George took important time away from his component of the challenge to help her out. Now I thought this was awesome to see, both on a personal but also on a strategic level. As mentioned, George could struggle to get some jury votes at the end if the jury sees him as solely this gamebot type player that didn't have their best interests at heart. And on top of that, Wei has also considered siding with Flick to get him out of the game. Now, this small act of kindness could assist him in both aspects of this game, showing he's actually a pretty good bloke, in addition to being a big strategist by assisting Wei in this challenge. But also, it may make Wei more likely to stick with him as the game goes on, rather than side with Flick at the next vote. So I actually thought it was a smart move by George, given it was unlikely he would win this challenge overall. This challenge had another puzzle portion at the end, which came down to a Cara versus Hayley showdown, with Hayley again getting it done and I believe winning her 3rd individual immunity this season. And as I've mentioned before, watch out. She could definitely take the rest of them out, it really would not surprise me. So Hayley and Flick are both safe, with the vote coming down to George, Wei and Cara this tribal council, with Flick on the surface having all the power here, and at this stage no one knows it. So George kicks off the post-challenge conversation by telling Flick to go look for an idol, which really may have been the last nail in his coffin. There is a very big chance Flick's one vote will decide the fate of the game this episode, and she's made it very clear that she wants George gone. However, George always has a plan B, and his plan B tonight is Way. He has noticed Flick has not been very active in searching for this idol, so he has to be somewhat worried that she does already have it in her possession. So his plan B is to put 2 votes on Way with his sidekick in Kara. So that would mean there would be 2 votes on Flick, 2 votes on Way, and 1 vote on George. Now this is actually genius, as if Flick does not have an idol, on the revote they would switch their votes and she would still go home. But if George's hunch is correct, which it is, and Flick does have an idol, then Way goes home. So with Hayley having immunity, he obviously could not target her, and even if she didn't, the number one plan for everyone should be taking Flick out before the final 2. And Hayley is probably the only person left in the game who would comfortably beat Flick at the majority of immunity challenges. So I do think that would have played on his decision as well anyway. As well as he thinking that he can beat Hayley at the end of the game. Man, this was another incredible read by George, and looks like he has come up with another amazing plan that shows he really is the biggest player out there this season. The only person that could mess this plan up for George is his sidekick Kara, who is known for making the odd mistake this season due to playing with her emotions. She is a very sentimental player, and she would like to fill in Hayley on this plan to not stir the pot too much before it gets down to the nitty-gritty portion of the game. So if Kara does decide to tell Hayley about this plan, Hayley obviously would not want Way to go as they are a very tight pair. And they could bring Flick in and then take George out as per Flick's original idea. Or even conjure a new plan to go against Kara herself. Flick also still wants to work with Hayley due to them both being physical threats and advises her to seriously consider taking out George now while she still can. Way and Hayley are also seriously contemplating joining forces with Flick, which would make George's plan of putting 2 votes on Way not matter at all. So this tribal, it looks as though it's either going to be 2 votes Flick, 2 votes Way, 1 vote George, with the idol negating Flick's votes and Way going home, or it could be 3 votes George and 2 votes Way, with George going home, which would also be an epic tribal council. But once we got to Tribal Council, another alternative did arise, with Kara really considering going back on this original plan, as she wanted to keep it simple and did not want to leave Hayley out. This would make the vote 3 votes Flick if she switched, 1 vote Way and 1 vote George. So after the idol was played, I would predict George would still go home on the revote between himself and Way, and all these votes Kara has saved George throughout this season would come crashing down when he needed her the most. But George was able to keep Kara on side, and in a 2-2-1 vote, and honestly one of the best moves of this season, George survives yet another day in this game and Way is sent to the jury. Way was so gracious as she left the game, and she was so thankful to each of them. She took it like an absolute champ. She's a true gem and an absolutely lovely human being. It was a really great episode tonight with lots of different alternatives and variations playing out with just 5 people left in the game. However, the preview to the next episode basically spoiled the whole thing in about 15 seconds, so I hope each of you turned them off before you saw them. There is still so much for Australian Survivor to learn, and I hope the criticisms they received this season will help them start thinking about improvements to make for future seasons they produce. However, with only 2 episodes to go, it will be very interesting to see how this season concludes. I will see you all tomorrow for what I believe to be the second to last episode of this season. As always, thanks to each and every one of you for watching. This is Analytical Strategy signing out, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.